Well, hello and welcome to the Exercism podcast. It's Jonathan here, and I'm joined with Taiyab, not by, with Taiyab. Taiyab has been an integral part in the whole design of Exercism and another company called Kaido. You can go and check that one out as well, kaido.org. But Exercism is the one that he's kind of spent a lot of his time recently putting together, especially moving it from V2 to V3. And we'll drill into that a little bit later. But Taiyab, it's super to have you here with us today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Tell us, where are you currently? What are you doing? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
So first of all, Jonathan, thanks for taking the time out to speak. Much appreciated. Where do I start? I guess right from the beginning, right? Origin stories. This is.
Go for it.
So I was gonna say I was born. No. So let's go. Let's start from something a bit relevant. So I guess the best place to start is probably, I guess, where I grew up, where I was born. So I was born in Birmingham in the UK. In quite a, I guess, looking at it now, quite a deprived area, actually. Mm-hmm. So I'm from a town, actually, just technically slightly outside of Birmingham, called Smethwick. There's literally like almost like a border sign. Like if you just walk like 5 seconds down the road, there's like a border that says Birmingham, and then on one side it says Smethwick, and on one side it says Birmingham. So technically, I'm like on the outside of it. But yeah, it's quite a deprived area, at least as I've been growing up. And it's very, very diverse, very multicultural. Like everyone's here from everywhere, like all over the world. It's been quite an interesting experience growing up here. Like I'm currently still in the same area, in the same city. And yeah, like it's been interesting getting to be in a place where you have like a complete melting pot of ideas, a complete melting pot of different types of people with different perspectives from all over the world. And that's kind of, I think, shaped me in a lot of how I see the world today. I always acknowledge that there's another perspective out there, and that like the world is way greater than just my little part of it. And I would say that like going back a bit to like my father and my mother and all that side of things too. My father was very entrepreneurial, like as well. So just for context, he was a migrant to the country, so he migrated from Pakistan. Secondly, technically, I'm a second and third generation immigrant, I guess, because my grandfather and my father both migrated to the country. So my grandfather actually migrated after World War II, and that's a whole separate story.
Oh wow! So that was that's a while ago, hey?
Yeah, a long while ago. He was actually born in, believe it or not, he was born in 1901. So my grandfather is really old. Yeah, he's very old.
Is he still alive?
No. He died when I was young. He died about 30 years ago, roughly.
Okay, I was going to say, because he'd be like 119 now.
Yeah, he'd be very old right now. But yeah, so that's a whole different story. But both my grandfather and my father migrated to the country. So yeah, whatever that makes me, I don't know what that makes me second generation or whatever.
And Birmingham, was it just that Birmingham was a natural landing point, or I mean, you think London maybe, but yeah.
So initially we actually started. I say we, like my father's family and how he settled here. I think they started in the south of England first. I can't remember exactly where. I think it was near Surrey, in the south of England. Yeah. And the reason why they started there is just as a consequence of the war. So what happened is my grandfather moved to Surrey. In fact, he actually had to escape to Surrey. So what happened is in the Battle of Dunkirk, basically in World War II, my grandfather was fighting in that war.
Really? He was on the Dunkirk. He was
deployed. Yeah,
wow.
He was deployed there. So he wasn't. He was part of like what they call like the transport company, or like basically shipping supplies to the front line, basically.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening, he had to escape in the retreat too, and they ended up in the south of England, obviously, as a result of the evacuation at the time. And so that was his first, I think, exposure to the south of England and being there and all that sort of stuff. And then later on, he kind of moved there as well, and kind of actually migrated and settled there too. So we have a bit of a history from the war, basically, in being in the country. And then my father then came over after World War II and stuff and all that. And, for economic reasons, as a migrant, came and then worked in the country and all that. So because I come from like a very, I guess, hardworking migrant background, like those sorts of like, that sort of grit and that sort of like mindset was kind of drilled into me quite a bit. So my father was always like very entrepreneurial, like hustler, go-getter type. He's been in every business you can think of. He started out, to name but a few. He started out selling leather jackets on like a weekend market. He got into like warehousing, so he used to like kind of warehouse kitchenware and that sort of stuff. Then he started his own store selling those goods as well on retail. Then he was a driving instructor for a long time. Then he's basically done everything.
Done it all.
He's done it all. So I feel like that's kind of where I got some of my entrepreneurial DNA from, definitely from him. And so what I started doing, and this is going in now a bit to the story of tech and how I got into it, is basically I was always a very entrepreneurial kid, like always. So what happened is I have a lot of siblings, so I have 4 brothers and 2 sisters, so it's quite a community of us.
A clan, it's like a football team. It's
like a football team. We just rock up somewhere and we just take over the place. But it's nice having a lot of siblings in a lot of ways, because you get to like bounce ideas off each other. You get to like, especially growing up, you play around with each other a lot. Like,
and it's robust. I mean, you can't get away with a bad idea. It's going to get pulled down and trampled on pretty quickly. Exactly. So there's no place for nonsense, basically. But what I used to do, taking advantage of this community, is I would always be the guy or the brother like that would like kind of see an opportunity and then try and take it, right? So I remember like selling like sweets and things to my brothers when we were really small, like this is like an 8 or something or whatever. Right? I'd be the guy who like hoarded all the sweets and the chocolates and everything. And then as soon as like it was late at night and like my siblings were like, oh, I want a chocolate, I want a sweet, I want this, I'd be like, you can buy it off me, it's only £1. You must have done pretty well, I tell you.
I was doing pretty well as a kid with all that stuff. And then like growing up, I carried on like having this kind of seeing the market, seeing the demand and trying to fill it sort of mindset. And then I did the same thing in school as well. I sold stuff in school and got in trouble for that as well. That's a different thing as well. But then carried on doing this more and more. And then obviously discovered the internet. Everybody got on. This was when I was probably about 10, 11, 12 years old. We got the whole dial-up modem and did all that. Got connected up to it. Tell me about it. That noise is still
ringing.
Still etched in there. And I still get frustrated when people pick up the phone, right? And it used to cut the line off as well.
Oh, that was so annoying.
But and they got connected up to the web and then just got into like all sorts of stuff from there. So my family were all like really big gamers. So we got into all the games, like typically we played a lot of RPGs actually. So this is for the gamer nerds, but we played a lot of Korean MMOs growing up. So this is like Lineage 2, and also some Western ones too, like RuneScape as well. That was the game to play. This is back in the early 2000s. So
the link will be in the show notes, presumably, if it still exists.
RuneScape's definitely still around, and Lineage is here and there, but link in the show notes for sure. And then sort of we got from there, and then this is where like the tech stuff starts. So got from getting into gaming, and then basically my brother was really into his games and therefore joined clans and stuff with them. And then these clans and these guilds, they needed like websites and stuff, right? So they started building like communities around them. Like my brother would be the guy who then they would go to and say, well, can you like make a website for this, please? Or this web page, right? And this was back in the day when you used to use something called Microsoft Front Page, which is like what you see is what you get editor. Do you remember that?
I can't say I do. I mean, it sounds like a primitive version of Wix, or
Basically.
like, it's like the most basic fundamental version of that.
Yeah, basically. And what people used to do on front page is they used to you would used to design an image as the web page, stick it on front page or whatever, and then you used to, in order to kind of put content in it, you would have to cut out a slice of the image, set it as the background, and then add the text on top of that.
I see.
So that is how you used to create web pages, essentially, an image, and you just slice it up into a million different pieces and then present it with some of the things as background and text on top.
So a very primitive version of React and components on some level, you could say. Maybe we're getting a little tenuous at this point, but okay. No, that's
So this is OG internet, right? This is how it all began. And then what I used to do, I mean, this is back in the time where households had one shared computer amongst everyone in the house. So,
and with 8 siblings, or
with 8 siblings, I mean, I was a professional backseat gamer, a professional backseat developer. I would just sit behind my brother watching, oh, do this, do that.
Yeah.
Oh, you should move this over there. You should do that.
Yeah. The strategist of all strategists. No, don't do that. That's it.
And I think one day he just got so frustrated. He just turned around to me and goes, Taiyab, just do it yourself. Design your own website, and then you can do this all yourself. Stop telling me what to do. And then I was like, okay, sure. So
move aside. Thank you very much.
So when it was my turn on the computer, I would then go on and start designing websites and things for various things I was interested in. It was always about what was cool at the time. So I was quite into anime and Gundam and that sort of stuff at the time as well. Into Dragon Ball Z, that sort of stuff. So yeah, I would create websites for those things that I was interested in, and then go from there a little bit. And then what happened is I started getting more and more into it. I joined a few forums online.
Okay.
Around the idea of freelancing and design and all that sort of stuff. Because I started thinking, well, maybe I can make some money freelancing or something, being a designer. And this is when I also started getting into code more as well. Obviously, first in websites and then other stuff later. And then carried on progressing from there. Got more into designing websites and doing all that sort of stuff.
So did the design side of things was that where you veered towards? You might say, was it kind of okay, I want to design this. Oh, therefore I need to know a bit of JavaScript. Was it that way around? Because some people come at it from, I'm going to learn to code. Oh no, I need to learn how to design on top of that. So was yours design led essentially?
So no, it was everything was from a very utilitarian standpoint, right? So it was I need to launch this website for this idea that I have. How do I do it? Right? Okay. Oh, I need to learn this. I need to learn that. I need to learn that. Right?
And then so down the rabbit warren with learning essentially. Yeah.
Down the rabbit hole. Yep, exactly. So it was everything I ever did was from utilitarian standpoint. So it was just here's an idea I have, or here's something that I want to bring to market. How do I do it?
Yeah. And would you say that informs your design now, even kind of, because I love your designs. I think they're super clear and easy to understand from a practical perspective. And so I can now see that there's clearly a train of thought that runs through how you think through design.
I would say so definitely. I think with design especially, it has to achieve the clarity and the objectives that's needed, right? So that's why it's super important early on to be defining what it is you want this page to do on multiple levels. So not just on what buttons or what things do we want people to do when they get off here, or what do we want them to know, but also emotively, what do we want people to feel when they're on there, and what are the primary things that we want people to do and feel when they're on that page, right? So whenever you do any piece of design work, the first thing you do is you define objectives. You define I want people to come on here and do X, Y, and Z, and then think of everything through that lens, right? Yeah. So and also when it comes to designing a page, you always want to think it through from a very heavily emotional standpoint too. So I'll give you an example. So if you're talking about a recent page that we're designing about this we're actually building like a page on Exercism to describe or show the build state of a track right now, right? So that, for example, requires a multitude of things. First, it requires what I call the activation, which is like getting people emotionally invested in that thing first. So what I find is when it comes to motivating somebody to do something, first you need to get them emotionally invested, then you got to show them the details of what needs to be done, right? So that whole top of the page is dedicated to showing impact, and therefore motivating people or emotively connecting with them so that they are emotionally invested in doing the thing. So just seeing the impact of their work. So the headline is like, 50,000 students have benefited from the Elixir track, for argument's sake. And then once you've kind of established the emotive connection, and once you've kind of given that piece of motivation to them at the beginning, then you can go into the depth and detail of things, right? So much like anything, it basically has to follow a story that makes sense from top to bottom. And as long as you're following that through line where you're accounting for people who both know about your service and don't know about your service, or are part of the Exercism community or not part of the Exercism community, or are senior maintainers or lower level maintainers, you got to think of all those personas and then feed them through that story and see if it makes sense to them.
Okay. So looking at Exercism, then pulling back as a whole, what were some of the key emotional things that you were trying to hit with Exercism, like when you were redesigning version 3? Or can you explain kind of how you went from version 2, where it was? I mean, where did you get involved again with Exercism? Was it V1 or V2?
So
like where
just past just past the launch of V2. Okay. So V2 had just launched. Jeremy had done a very kind of detailed analysis of like the launch of V2, what happened. I think it might have been a year after that or two. I'm not sure exactly when. But he had done like a blog post on breaking down V2, like what impact it had on the user base and signups and all that sort of stuff. And that's the point that I got involved. So it was roughly 2 years before the launch of V3.
Okay. So you've come in at V2, just post V2 launch, and you're now going to re-envision this platform for learning to code. What were how did you go about that? What were the sort of key things that you were trying to hit? I'd love to find out a little bit about how you approached that.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, it started off with a huge amount of sync from Jeremy and I. So at the time, it was only Jeremy and I that were working on the Exercism V3 product per se. So we were the people who were going to do everything. Jeremy was going to code it all and I was going to design it all, right? And that was it. And we're talking about a huge platform here with so much to it. It looks simple
when you first start out, you're like, how hard can it be? And then sort of 9 months later, you're like, another modal.
Tell me about it. Literally, I mean, that's like one of the signs of, I think, somebody. I mean, that's what we all do, right? Like, so at the beginning, we sort of have to look at things in like a very simplistic way. Like, let's say even if we take a business idea or a product that you're building or whatever it is, we say, oh yeah, that shouldn't be too difficult. Like, because we don't quite know the details of it, or we're just kind of thinking, this will be interesting. And we need that sort of naivety to kind of get into it a little bit. And then also the grit that comes with then seeing the detail of it and then saying, okay, let's break this up into small pieces. Let's try and do this bit first and then this bit. And then once you like get into the detail of it and understand how complex and vast that problem is, then just developing, I should say, the grit and the consistency to be able to kind of execute on a long-term plan, right? So you need both the naive, like high-level thinking at the beginning, just to say, we should do this thing, and then the execution and the deep work part of the actual doing.
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, it's like you need to get to that point where you're like, we're too far down the road to turn back.
Yep. Yeah, so, there's no heading back from here. Yeah, for sure. But going back to the how the process began, I guess it's basically a huge amount of sync from Jeremy and I at the beginning. So we spoke. I mean, I think we spent I'd say about 4 or 5 hours a day chatting to each other for like a week straight or something.
Wow.
Right? And that was just like figuring out our philosophies on things, figuring out like our intentions for things, like me just getting a good understanding of where things are at with Exercism too. So just downloading all his thinking on where we're at, what the history's been, why we're here. A lot of the times when it comes to design especially, you want to know how somebody got to that point, so you know what they eliminated in the process, right? So I then know not to go for going down those routes that might waste a lot of time, or they've already been explored or whatever. So it was important for me coming on the project to just really understand everything and not just to try and be like, oh yeah, that needs to be changed, or we should change this without even knowing whether it had been addressed before. So yeah, it was a lot of syncing up, a lot of that. And then we just took it bit by bit. So I started out just doing some like more creative conceptual things first. What I find with these sorts of things is there needs to be a period of exploration, of sort of, I guess, opening your mind, or opening up the possibilities as to what could be done. So that would be just be messing around with various visual styles, messing around with certain layouts for particular pages, that sort of stuff. Just trying to get a feel for the thing you're going for, right? And one of the core ideas or core principles in my head that I wanted to kind of base everything off was basically this idea of accessibility, right? Okay. So code is seen, or programming is seen as a thing that's very inaccessible. It's seen as very difficult, and it is quite difficult for sure, especially at times. It's a new skill that requires a tremendous amount of effort to acquire, as do new skills do. So as a result of that, it needed to then, as a direct response to that, the website itself, or the design itself, or the branding itself needed to be approachable. It needed to be approachable. It needs to seem fun and easy. And it needs to feel like I, as maybe somewhat of a novice programmer, can come in and do stuff, right? This is not some exclusive community of just hardcore devs.
Where your forum is like a nightmare to even decrypt.
Exactly. You just like kind of click on, you're like, I don't know what's going on, and you click off. Like that's what we didn't want to have happen. So everything revolved around that. So even we're talking about the iconography on the site, everything seeming very happy and smiley and approachable, colorful. It was all just saying, come in, get involved, and do your best. And it's also one of the things that informed like how we did the whole peak end stuff. So peak end is this idea that it's kind of like the emotions or the impact you want somebody to feel when they've gone through a journey and they're hitting like the success part of it, or the end goal of it. And so even as we kind of designed what the end of an exercise looked like, or what the completion of a track looked like, or whatever, we always wanted to keep in mind this idea that we wanted to kind of catapult people into learning and overcome a lot of those barriers that they would have, right? And also, one of the goals that I had was to make learning habitual as well, so that it would overcome a lot of the barriers that you have in terms of just having to get up and practice every day or something.
The slogging it out type thing.
The slogging it out. And that's what it is, really. Exactly. And that's what it really all is, right? It's, with any skill, it's deliberate practice. It's waking up every morning and thinking, oh, I should learn this thing. I should spend a couple hours deliberate practice on this thing. And that's how we all get better. So essentially building in a lot of those, you know how we get addicted to social media, and they're built to be addictive. I know it's hard to do that with things that are difficult, but I wanted to try and create as much of that as possible with this too. So to make something hard like learning addictive too, which is a much harder goal for sure.
And so how did so clearly in the site, there's an element of, that we throw the term around gamification all over the shop, and it's kind of like a bit of a buzzword, right? In tech, like let's gamify everything. But how did you approach that in a way that was meaningful and kind of appropriate? Because it is a term that is thrown around, but clearly, if it's done right, it's really positive.
Yeah.
How did you approach that?
So gamification is all about effort and reward, right? And in reality, all it really is elevating or making clearly defined what the rewards are for the effort that's made, right? So I feel with things like badges and things like that, and reputation even to a large extent, it's all just geared around making sure that the things you're rewarding are things that are worth rewarding. And that's it, really. So, for example, let's say somebody completed the Elixir track, for argument's sake. Creating a badge for that and rewarding that is a very sensible thing to do in terms of elevating and clarifying to that person that, wow, you did something great here, right? So it's not just about adding numbers and scores and badges and things to random things. It's about associating it to the actual learning and behavior patterns that people experience when they use a certain platform. Right. So to me, it's all about things being meaningful. If a gamification element is either rewarding me for a behavior that I did correctly or well, or a desired behavior, then it's amazing. But if you're just introducing points for like some, a relatively meaningless or arbitrary reason, that's when you're going to get the confusion and you're going to get the problems, right? Even when it came to us designing reputation, for example, it needs to be that you had some meaningful contribution to the platform in order to gain reputation. And then that reputation would truly serve as a way of showing your contribution to the community and hence your sort of, I guess, your status in things as well.
Okay. And so now then coming back, what was, so if we rewind a little bit back to when you started out coding and designing and all of that, how did you, from a coding perspective now, what was your journey, your process there, and how did you motivate yourself to learn that?
Yeah, so I'd say, it was all just about trying to launch certain products and services. So being the entrepreneurial kid or whatever, it was, I have this idea for a business, right? Okay, let me see if I can build a product to then sell to people and then even sell the business, right? Yeah. So back in that time, there was also like a website called SitePoint that a lot of people used. This was like a reference for developers, web developers specifically, to use, and it would talk about all the new cool ways you could use CSS and do this and do that. But it also had a marketplace on there, right? Okay. So people would actually come and sell their businesses on there and buy businesses on there or sell domains. Okay. Yeah. And so I got really involved in this. So once I saw like all the businesses being sold for like, there was like a website that was, I think selling like golf clubs or something. I can't remember, something random. And it was like, it sold for like $10,000. And I was like, and this is when I was like 15, 16 years old, right? So I looked at
that's
this.
That's a lot of money.
I was like, 10 grand, I could do with 10 grand right now. So, so what I ended up doing is just basically trying to launch products and services and then having to learn how to code on the back of that. Okay. So, so one day I would have an idea for a product or service. Let's say, I don't know, I want to create, in fact, one of the websites I did create very, very early on. And forgive me for this. This was when it was acceptable. But I created this like sort of like basically just a link page, I guess you could call it. So back in the day, you had this this idea called, I think, the $1 million web page or something, right? Where somebody would sell advertising on every like pixel of their 1,000 by 1,000 page.
I remember those ones. Yeah.
Yeah, so I did something similar to that, which was like essentially just a list, like a huge page, which is like a list of links, essentially. And I was 12 years old, so guys, forgive me for this. Right? Forgive me for this. But, I would basically sell links on that website, and then people would like the next link that got purchased for, let's say, $5 would go at the top of the list. And then the list would just keep growing, and the next link would go up and up and up. And then basically I would wake up like every day and check my phone. And this was back when smartphones were still
the Nokia 3310.
Oh, yeah. I mean, no, I think there were smartphones at the time, but they were just very horrible. Yeah. And I would see like 10 new sales or whatever on the thing that I was doing. So that really motivated me. So then I just kind of carried on learning from there. And then I did like eventually, after doing the whole like hustling on SitePoint and selling all these products and services, making a bit of money on that. And then I actually did go to university for computer science. Okay. So I did take the formal step after that. So it was very utilitarian. It was, let's just learn how to build this thing for the sake of getting it to market. And then it turned into, okay, let's actually study this thing more in depth. So I went to university, did computer science. Of course, a large part of that is programming. And that's where I got heavily involved in doing like game development and C#, JavaScript, that sort of stuff. And that's kind of the perspective I took from it. So I did go to university then for computer science.
And how did you find then the commercial businessy piece, and then obviously the nuts and bolts of learning computer science, which is probably on a bit of a lower level than the business side of things.
Yeah.
But how did you then weave those two things together? Because those are two very different perspectives, but they're very linked. Yeah.
Yeah, they're very linked. It's like approaching the same problem from two perspectives, right? One is I have a problem first. How do I solve it? And one is, well, I'm building, relatively generic skills, and then they're going to apply to some sort of problem later on, right? So I always found that it was difficult to motivate myself when I wasn't working from the problem first. Okay. And when I was just generically learning something, because it didn't directly lead to something, I found that a very difficult motivational path to take, like a very difficult executional path to take. So while I was at university, I was doing both. So what ended up happening is the thing that really sparked my kind of love of programming to a large extent was when we had a first year project to do of developing a game. So rather than just learning things in theory and saying, okay, theoretically, here's how you do this and that, and go and practice it. It was, no, here's the end goal. You're going to make a game, and let's work backwards from there, and here's how you're going to do it. So, like I mentioned before, my family and I, all my siblings, we come from a gaming background. So making a game was like, yeah, let's do that, right?
Yeah, I can do that.
I'm going to do that one. And so when it came to like doing it that way around, here's what we want to do, and then let's work backwards from there. Then I was highly motivated to do all of it, any of it. But I always struggled with just learning in isolation with no real distinct end goal. That was tough.
Okay, and so now gaming and you're building this game, and so let's just go through. So you get to the end of university, you now have like a formal computer science degree. You've still got these businesses ticking over on the side, and you're now involved in two businesses which are very much education, culture, and learning. I mean, Kaido is probably like people education, you could say, on one level. Was there ever a kind of like, this is the trajectory that I want to move in from an industry perspective? I know tech is a generic sort of umbrella, you could say, but the education piece or the people development space, or someone might be like fintech or whatever. Is there any specific industry that you're like, I'm really interested in this and would love to see?
So I would say right now, I would say I'm at where I'm at because I essentially followed my nose. Right. So what tends to happen is people kind of follow their nose a little bit first. So they kind of go down a path that seems interesting to them. And then they go down it. And then after a certain level of time has lapsed on either that thing or they've explored a bunch of things, then they kind of start maybe making specific judgments about which industries or what problems they want to tackle specifically. Right. So I'd say I'd gotten involved with Kaido and Exercism in large part being connected with Jeremy and getting to know him. And I didn't even tell you the story about how I got to know him and where I met him as well.
We can do that. We could do that in a second, but just finish this one.
Sure. But yeah, so sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No, it was just about like specific industry, following the nose.
Yeah. So it was more like I just loved designing product, and I just wanted to work on stuff that was interesting. So when I was proposed various things, especially when Jeremy and I chatted and we talked through stuff, it seemed like a really interesting problem to try and tackle. So it's always, for me, it was just, what's the problem that looks interesting for me to tackle? Let's go and tackle it. I am starting to get a flavor for the problems that I care about in the world and where I want to address. But that's like, I think, more of a thing for that's going to develop more over the next, I think, 3 or 4 years or the coming years for sure.
Oh, cool. And yeah, so now you met Jeremy post-university somewhere along the line. What was that all about?
There's another story embedded in here. So I actually met Jeremy whilst I was at university. We didn't go to the same university. He's like 10 years older than me. But what ended up happening is so I told you I was into startups and business and entrepreneurship and all that. So there was a startup hack weekend that was being conducted at a local university, at Aston University. Shout outs to Aston. So my friend and I decided to attend this hack weekend because why not? We're interested in tech. We're interested in designing and developing stuff. Why not?
Yeah.
So I went to this event, and then there were various pitches to get put into groups and whatnot. And I remember Jeremy pitching for his idea, and the idea was a home automation thing, basically, right?
So he was years ahead of his time. Smart cities and smart homes, all of that kind of jazz. Yeah.
Exactly. So it was like a home automation tool called Aya, which is like a Hindi word for I think like caretaker or something.
Okay.
And it was the whole home automation thing. You wake up in the morning, the blinds come up, the lights come on,
coffee's made,
the coffee's brewing, all of that jazz. So this was the idea that Jeremy pitched, and then I kind of got involved. Basically, I wanted to join his group. His idea sounded interesting, and that's where I met Jeremy and a couple of the colleagues of mine too. And that was 11 years ago, I think, something like that. And then later on, what happened is I got involved in Jeremy's startup after that. So he was running a company in the medical education space, and he was hiring designers, and he was really keen to have me on. So from that like initial startup hack weekend, then to meeting up afterwards in coffee shops and things, we got to know each other, and then I sort of joined his journey for his startup whilst I was at university. So what I did is I had this problem, right, of do I spend the next 2 years at university, or do I join this startup and try and make it work like that in industry?
Learn a lot more in a lot shorter space of time.
You're
potentially.
Right. Yeah. So this was the dilemma I was having. I'm sure a lot of people have this same dilemma a lot of the time. So I thought, okay, I've got this problem here and this problem here. How can I get both? Right? How can I do both? Because I didn't want to just stick to one. So I thought, okay, what I can do is I can go to the university and say, can I do a year in industry? And then go to Jeremy and be like, I'm doing a year in industry.
You need to hire me.
You need to hire me. So that's kind of how I pitched it. So I went to the university and said, I want to do a year in industry, even though I had no intentions to do a year in industry prior to that. And then I went to Jeremy and go, well, I'm doing a year in industry. I can work for you for a year like that. And that's kind of how it all started. So then I joined Education, which was his previous startup, and then we worked through that, and then I did end up leaving and going to university and kind of finishing my degree. But then fast forwarding to now, like we're talking almost 10 years later, that we reconnect and then we get back into things, and then I join Exercism, and we all go from there. Okay,
cool. So thank you for going through the history of Taiyab, like in a very short space of time. You've covered a heck of a lot of ground, which is really cool. So now, what would you recommend to anyone who's sort of signing up to Exercism or is wanting to start off that coding journey? Like, what would you've hinted a few times, like find a problem to solve potentially and all of that kind of stuff, but what would be your kind of key recommendations to someone who's wanting to step into the tech space and sort of get their feet under the table, you could say?
Yeah, so I would recommend a few things. First is just get a lay of the land, right? Understand what you're getting into. Have a strong reason as to why you're getting into it. And also understand that it's going to be a difficult journey, and just understand and expect that. With anything that's worth it, it's hard to do. Things that are hard to do are rewarding, and programming is no different, right? There's definitely a fun element to it as well. I mean, it's amazing to just go in and be able to build stuff and write stuff, but you need to learn the foundational stuff to do that initially, and there's effort required there. So just understand that. I would say that secondly, like go for the very novice-focused platforms and tools that currently exist. So have a look around. There's plenty of them out there. Give them a try first. See if it's for you. So just get your feet wet a little bit, really. And then if you love it and you start getting, love is a very strong word here. But if you're interested in it and you're getting you're saying, okay, this is kind of interesting, I want to do a bit more, then just keep following your nose on it, keep at it more and more every day. I would say that finishing one of these novice platforms is a good idea too. Like getting to 100% completion on them is a good step. And And then if you've got an appetite for more, just keep going. Go and, you know, sign up to Exercism. Go and sign up to all these other things that exist, Code Academy or a tree house or something like that. And really get your teeth stuck in. But you have to kind of keep dipping your feet in more and more and more and see if you like it.
No, sure. I think one of my observations for me personally was you can get this like real moment of excitement. Oh, I want to learn how to code. And then you like set sail and then you hit like a brick wall where it's like, wow, there's so many people to choose from. Where do I start? And then you actually have to explore the different ways that people teach as well before you can really be like, actually, this is how I relate to this issue really well. And then once you've done that, then it's like, okay, next phase, you actually have to, I would say, break the problem down, like you mentioned previously, into very small kind of achievable steps. Because if you like, oh, I want to write a website in JavaScript or React or whatever, it's going to feel really, really far out there. So, no, I think that's really, really good advice. So, a couple more questions for you, Taiyab, today. So we have this concept called the hill that you would die on in these shows that we've been doing, and it sounds pretty melodramatic, and maybe it is. But the concept is essentially: is there one opinion or thought that you would hold fast to within the tech industry that you think is like a non-negotiable, something that you would absolutely fight for tooth and nail? Fight maybe a bit strong, but if you know what I mean, like you would really say, this, I believe this is key, I'm not going to budge on this. What would that opinion be, and how would you kind of explain that to everyone kind of listening?
So this wouldn't be maybe a specific technology opinion or thought. It's more a bit broader than that. But I think as a society or just as the world, we're experiencing a very unprecedented time where the people that control the computers and the robots have all the power, basically. And what's not happening is there's not enough of a trickle down of value to the people who are not developing those technologies or own them, to have the strengths or the augmentations that they give you. Right? Because at this point, we're all androids, right? Pretty much. I mean, we have these devices in our pockets. They empower our thought and they give us access to all this technology. They let us do crazy things that we weren't previously able to do. But the thing is, like, a lot of that power is still being owned and controlled and harvested by, you know, big companies, etc., etc. So what I would say is we still haven't learned as a society to kind of give that value to everyone. And I think that's something that I've been kind of thinking about more and more. It's something that I'm quite passionate about, and I've been doing a lot of reading around, just trying to figure out. And this problem's trying to be tackled on multiple levels. So, of course, giving people just more accessibility to program is a way of putting that power into the hands of everyday people. But also politicians are trying to do it from their level, and you know there are other organizations on various levels that are trying to do that too. So that's something that I care quite deeply about, and it's something that I'm watching with a vivid eye. I can't tell you that I have a specific like part of that I'm gonna either execute on or work on or whatever. But Exercism is a platform that kind of works towards a lot of that. So. From what we can do and what's within my power to do, I think I'm at least making a small dent into that problem, for sure.
So then, really practically speaking, and maybe this is putting you on the spot here, like what could you and I do like today that would just make things a little bit more accessible? I know you spoke about Exercism trying to be as accessible as possible, but how would you position your mind and the actions that you enact today to kind of play that out a little bit?
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, it's a very difficult question. I would say. I mean, I could tell you the typical thing of like, you know, introducing programming literacy to everyone, etc., etc. But even that doesn't do it justice. Like what we're seeing, for example, is a lot of innovation in AI, a lot of innovation in obviously crypto stuff too, and all that. And we're starting to see like a bit of that value coming down to us. So, for example, if you look at a lot of these AI kind of image generators, you can now just write a couple keywords into an AI tool, and it'll generate like a beautiful painting for you, basically. It's actually a tool made by Discord, I think. Yeah, what I would say specifically is that we should probably just do a better job of, I guess, our immediate vicinity or immediate families. So we talk about this on a very Exercism is a platform that's doing this and this, but maybe we should teach our own families to do the things that we talk about, right? Maybe our parents, especially, they might have been out of the fold quite a bit in terms of technology. Maybe they don't use their smartphone as much as they could. Maybe they don't know how to do any of the basic things that we take for granted every day. So I think definitely teaching older generations how to adopt technology and use it, teaching younger generations too, and just ensuring that our community in our immediate vicinity, in our immediate area, know about the tools, have access to them, and then are trained to use them in a confident way as well. I think that'll make a huge impact.
And I think, just to comment on that as well, maybe one thing is you're entrepreneurial is also to be like, how can we bridge the gap between what is perceived as very complex and make it simpler? Not that that's always that easy to do, but maybe build that level of abstraction that just allows more people to sort of I
also feel it's more of just like a cultural or just a general societal problem anyway. So I see us also aging out of younger technology, right? So we're not that young. Like I don't know how old you are, Jonathan, but I'm in my early 30s, right?
35, yeah.
35. So we're in our 30s, right? And there are things that I've heard about or don't even have a clue about that the 20s and the teens are doing that I have no clue.
Yeah.
Right. So I think there's a natural like, I guess, kind of not calcification, but almost like you just don't know what's on the younger side of things, or you don't know what the young kids are doing, or you don't know.
Your brain doesn't move as fast. That's the reality.
Brain doesn't move as fast. Yeah. Not as neuroplastic, and we're not, and also we're kind of busy. We're kind of busy doing stuff. We're busy building something. We're doing our day-to-day jobs, and therefore we're not able to have that exploratory phase anymore of going and discovering new technologies and discovering new things. Whereas younger people, obviously, they're not working a job typically, so they can go off and explore AI and explore this and explore that and learn so many cool new things that we get kind of aged out of a little bit. So I think there's just an issue of time too, and giving yourself the space and freedom to explore new stuff.
Yeah. Oh, cool. No, that's spot on. So one more question then before we kind of come into land. It's been an hour of goodness so far. What recommendation would you give to the Exercism community? And it can be anything. It can be as lighthearted as you want, which is, go and buy an ice cream or whatever. Or it can be as like, get into a hectic fitness regime. That's what you need to do. What recommendation would you make to our community this week that they just absolutely have to try?
So two things, and these are two things that I'm working on and I'm not very good at. So I'm not preaching here. I'm just saying these are things that we should all focus on as a collective community. One is getting better at communication. So not necessarily written communication, but spoken communication. One problem that I find in a lot of developer communities is that we're good at problem solving from a very logical standpoint. We're not good at articulating that problem or articulating that solution very well. So being able to build a narrative, be able to tell a story, definitely are skills that a typical programmer should learn. Just how to communicate better. So that's one thing. And the second thing would be to just maybe develop a bit more grit, I would say. So just understanding that things are not going to always go your way, and life will just throw stuff at you, and you're going to have to deal with it. So just, I think those two things are definitely valuable skills that we should all develop more, for sure.
Oh, that's awesome. I think just off the back of your grit comment, which I really like, facing things head on is way more beneficial than running away from the problem. And I think that's just something that I found true in the last couple of years for me is if there's an issue, it's better to walk towards it and go through it than it is to kind of try and skirt around it. And not engage with it.
And sometimes you'll need to like amp yourself up a little bit. Maybe I mean this is where the whole physical fitness comes into it. The reason why one of the reasons why people go to the gym is it gives them confidence. It gives them the kind of feeling of wanting to tackle the day. So I would say like amp yourself up and go and tackle those things. Go tackle those demons that you know are there.
Yeah, run at them. Well, Taiyab, thank you so much for your time today. It's always great hearing people's stories and getting those little nuggets, and there's plenty of goodness in what we've just spoken about today. So I really appreciate the time. Thank you for all of the work you put into the amazing designs of Kaido and Exercism, and for the ongoing work that you've done. And if you want to reach out to Taiyab and have a chat about design, I'm sure he's all ears within reason. We don't want the world sort of bang down your door, but if that happens, then we won't complain.
Feel free to message me on Slack. I'm there in Exercism Slack, and you can tweet me at Taiyab, Taiyab, and just hit me up on there. So no issues.
Great. So go check it out. Go check out the designs that he's put up there, and hopefully this has given you a little bit of an insight into the thought process, the way that Taiyab conceptualizes stuff. But again, thank you, and we'll touch base in a second. But thanks again, Taiyab. Thank you for your time, and check you soon.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Cool.